Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think if you listen carefully...
Nature has intended to give humanity
A healthy, happy sex life is the most wonderful and exciting. We've all experienced curiosity about ourselves and the opposite sex. Who hasn't?
Hello, everyone. I'm Megan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle, and welcome to Remedial Sex Ed.
So today is the Monday after Mother's Day. So to all you terrible children out there, get out your phones and buy your mom a last-minute bouquet of flowers and be like, oh, they messed up the delivery. Today's guest star is super special. I love her very much. Is my mama.
Hello there. I love you too.
Yeah. So we're recording this several weeks in advance, but when this comes out, I will have actually just seen you in Washington, D.C.
I know. I cannot wait.
It's going to be so good.
Yes. I know. It feels like it's been forever. I cannot wait to see you.
Yeah. I'm also super excited because you've agreed to be a guest on this podcast, even though you know it is essentially to teach sex education to anyone who listens to this. And I think it's super cool that as my mom, you're like, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, of course. It's important. We should talk about it as a society, as a group.
Yeah. Today, I wanted to ask you some pregnancy-related questions.
Okie doke.
So I'm our oldest child, yeah?
Yes.
You had me when you were relatively young. You were still in college.
Yes, I was.
And not only were you in college, but also you and Dad were not officially engaged yet.
No, we were not.
And I mean, all of that just sounds like kind of a stressful situation. So where were you in life prior to roughly September of 1990?
So before I found out I was pregnant with you, I was in college. I was finishing, I was basically a junior in college. And, I think I was probably a pretty standard young college student and busy with that and out having fun and whatnot. And not really thinking about the responsibilities of being a parent or being responsible for another person's life and happiness and well-being, just kind of figuring it out for myself. And, and then one day things changed pretty drastically. Yeah. So, that's kind of what happened, basically.
So how did you react? Like, you were getting sick, you'd missed your period. Like, were you pretty sure what the answer was before you took the pregnancy test?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, before I got pregnant, I was kind of under the impression that I would not get pregnant. It was not something that I wasn't trying to get pregnant, and didn't really think I was going to get pregnant, right? So it wasn't necessarily on my mind. But yeah, basically right away, it's very strange. Long before in those days, you had to miss your period and then wait for a certain amount of time before the test would show up positive. I believe these days, it's much quicker than it used to be. But you had to wait. So I was sick for quite a while, waiting to go through that time frame and whatnot. And knowing the answer, I knew in my heart right away. I think I knew, probably within days of getting pregnant, that I was pregnant. But knowing and not knowing at the same time is a very stressful kind of state of limbo to be in. And I think that is really the hardest point, regardless of where you are in how you consider yourself like an adult or a parent to be, that waiting period is very difficult. Very, very difficult. It was difficult with you, my first. It was difficult with my twins, number 2 and 3, and it was difficult with my last child.
I think it's interesting that you say, so you never really thought that you were going to go down the path of motherhood before having me, or it wasn't like a for sure want in your life?
No, it wasn't. But I wouldn't say that I had, decided categorically I don't want to be a mom as much as, I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
I was having a good time. And it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't, I kind of thought of motherhood as my mom. You know what I mean? I was so removed from even putting myself into the same category. So it wasn't that I was rejecting the notion altogether. It was that I hadn't really thought about that as my life. Gotcha. And I thought of myself as progressive, forward thinking. I came from, I grew up in a conservative state where people do have children kind of early. I didn't really see myself as part of that conservative culture. I saw myself as being kind of apart from that. So it just, again, it was not that it was like a repugnant thought to me as much as I just didn't even think about it. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then, and that all changed.
I want to talk about the sickness aspect for a second, because I don't think that schools really give enough of a heads up to the sickness. Like, it's something that gets mentioned in passing, or you'll see it on like TV shows. But I have a friend who she had such morning sickness that like on the way to work, she like threw up on herself in the car.
Oh my.
Yeah. Is the nausea that bad?
It can be. It definitely can be. It depends on the pregnancy, and it depends on the woman. And my understanding, I don't know if this is true or not. It was true for my pregnancies. I don't know if it's true for other people's, but I've heard that when you are pregnant with a female child, the morning sickness is worse. And I don't know if your like hormones get amped up more or what it is, but that was true for me. And I was pretty sick. Well, it went from being very sick to wanting to eat these little like powder sugar covered donuts. Like that was it. I operated in those two worlds.
Did you have any coping mechanisms for like dealing? Because my same friend who was having this extreme morning sickness, she would sit at her desk at work and like hold a lemon next to her face because apparently the citrus helped and the smell. But like that's the only way she could operate, was having it like that close to her. Yeah,
I believe that, to like shut down the smells, because everything becomes so amplified. So if you don't like something, I mean, your taste can change. You can like something one day and be like, oh no, I'm not going to even go near that food anymore. It's a very strange thing. So I don't know about coping mechanisms. I think crackers, like the little saltines and stuff like that, the same stuff that works for like the flu kind of works for being pregnant, but I would just say, boy, whatever works for you, like go with that.
What about the drop in energy?
That was really hard for me, actually. I think that was a very difficult thing, especially with you, my first child, because I was going from such a high level of energy, being so busy, doing lots of things, being in school, having social life, running around, working, just kind of like on the go 24/7, to where, I would sometimes just sleep and not be able to get up, sleep in, miss things, just not even be able to. It was very strange. It was a complete zap of energy. So physiologically, it is a complete 180. Mm-hmm. So your body goes into a whole different mode. It goes from like, I'm taking care of you and that's it, to, sorry, we've got a new job now. We're going to grow another person here.
Given all the symptoms that were kind of like showing, and the fact that you knew, how long did it take Dad to figure it out?
Oh, he was there. He was there when I took the test.
So were you pretty upfront with him about what you felt was going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I told him right away. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but I'm sure I told him I thought I was pregnant. I don't think he thought I could get pregnant either. So I think he was probably surprised as well. Yeah. I think I was less surprised. Like I said, I knew But I think for him, like seeing the, no, this is like the evidence. It's right there. That may have been more surprising for him because, obviously his body wasn't changing and, he wasn't in that same position. So.
How long after that positive pregnancy test did he propose?
This is kind of embarrassing. I don't remember.
You had bigger focuses going on right now.
So I don't know if I can, I don't know.
Okay.
It
We don't have
wasn't
to talk
that
about
long. I kind of remember how it went because we told Nanny and Grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
and they were kind of like, well, when are you going to get married?
I'm a little fascinated because I also grew up in Salt Lake, as did you. Like, I can pinpoint so many moments throughout high school and being a young adult of being shamed as a woman in that state. And I'm a little curious, like, how was the journey of being an unwed mother for you?
I think I was probably more self-conscious, more along the lines of things like, well, I thought I was going to be like professional, kind of like, how do I manage that? Like, I'm a scientist, but I also have a baby, and a backpack, that kind of thing. But that was my own internal conflict. That was not something imposed on me from other people. I feel like the people around me were great. When you were born, I took you to school with me, and my friends they were great. They would watch you when I was in class. At times I had to take you to class with me. My professors were amazing. I was a biology major, and they used you as an example for what neoteny is, which stands for childlike features, and it's what draws humans into like caring for kids in a way, right? So it's like big eyes and chubby cheeks and stuff like that, the characteristics that we feel protective over. And so when they taught that subject, they asked if, you could be their little star. When I went to work in the lab, the PI that I worked for, he was amazing. His wife was the manager of our lab. She was amazing. She would watch you when we had meetings. So the people around me were very supportive and very loving. And I think really you were very much embraced into like my adult life then, right? Mm-hmm. So it was not it's amazing how easily you slid into that. And it seemed seamless for you as a child, but also seemed really pretty seamless for my friends. It was more, the conflict was more how I saw myself, like in trying to figure that out, mm-hmm. But it wasn't, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but it wasn't, it was really actually fun. Once I kind of got past that like barrier of, wait a minute, this wasn't the plan, right? Mm-hmm. Like, well, it's the plan now.
Yeah.
So
how excited was Nanny to become a grandma?
Well, I think she was okay. So I would imagine this is like a 2-part question, right? Mm-hmm. So initially telling my parents that I was pregnant at 20 while I'm in college, stuff like that probably was not a conversation that they enjoyed, nor really one that I did either. But they were supportive from the beginning. And mm-hmm. I think once that initial shock of, again, wait a minute, this isn't the plan. Like, I think parents do kind of have a plan for their kids. And I'm sure for my parents, their plan for me was not to have a child in college, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that they saw that as, this is going to be much more difficult with a child than without one, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think initially I imagine there was some of that, like the worry about, how are you going to stay in school? How are you going to develop your career and mechanism to support yourself and your child. There's financial stuff. Like, I'm sure that those worries were all there. And I think that those worries for them probably showed up sooner because they were parents, right? They knew how hard it was to be adults and whatnot. I'm sure they still saw me as their child, right? So that transition, I imagine, was difficult for them. It's not something they ever were very vocal about, but I just, I know how thoughtful they are.
Well, they were also themselves really young parents.
Yes, I'm sure that showed up for them. But then again, like, I think, my friends and my family transitioned very quickly into, this is like the story now. It was a surprise plot. Like, nobody saw it going that way, but that's the way it went. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened in my entire life. So, and I think that they would say the same thing.
I do want to give a very big shout out to our family members, because from the stories I've heard, it sounds like, I'm sure the initial conversation was super difficult, but from the stories I've heard is like through the wedding and through raising me, like Nanny and Grandpa had the 3 apartments behind their house, of which I grew up in the one closest to them for the first 4 years of my life.
3. Yeah, just before you were 3, we moved.
And I got to see them every single day, which was awesome. I loved that. It meant I got to be super close with my grandparents, which is something that not everyone gets to be blessed with. And I don't know. I think my favorite story of great nanny and great grandpa was at your wedding when someone was trying to gossip with them about the aspect of a pregnant bride and like trying to make them feel shame. And they're like, yeah, no, we're excited to go baby clothes shopping. This is great.
Yeah. I don't remember that so much. I do remember, so I don't know if it was gossiping as much as, different people felt differently about it. And I think that, again, my family, I think it was much more progressive, maybe, than other people were. And so they were excited about that aspect. And that was my grandfather. And he did say, I think he felt some sensitivity from somebody. And he just mentioned something along the lines of, aren't you so excited? And I don't know that they were, but they became excited.
So, okay, we'll get out of society stuff and we'll go back to pregnancy. All right. So
that's interesting that you say that, because I think that when you say get away from society stuff and go back to pregnancy, the amazing thing is, like, your body, like biology and nature, it knows what it's doing for the most part, right? Like, it is so much of what happens that's stressful is the societal, like, overlay, right? It is like the stress of, again, like, okay, not being married. Wait a minute. Is this the right time? Is this the right person? Is this all of that stuff? But that's the societal pressure. What your body does is, it kind of like, it knows what to do. Nature knows. It's got it. Mm-hmm. It's the other pressures we put on ourselves.
Yep.
That comes from we do that to each other and we do that to ourselves.
I have some myth questions to ask you, and you can decide whether or not to answer any of these.
Sure. I mean, I'll answer. You can decide if you want to keep the answers.
So there's a lot of like fear around what happens to a woman's body during pregnancy, and like this kind of idea of like, I've been ruined forever.
Oh yeah. You mean like Barbie?
Yeah.
Malibu Barbie? Yeah, those days are over.
So the feet getting bigger and like staying bigger forever, like, true or false?
I don't really know. I would say that's probably true. I think people's feet do kind of keep growing in a certain way, though. anyways,
Okay.
even if you're not pregnant. I don't know. That would be I could double check that. But yeah, I mean, everything gets big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Oh, yeah.
never really shrinks back down.
Not the way it's supposed to. But again, people are different.
Okay.
I think I have many friends that wasn't true for. That,
Okay.
People's bodies are different. Definitely how you take care of yourself is going to make a difference. Exercise, diet, sleep, all that kind of stuff.
Does cocoa butter actually make any difference?
I didn't really use cocoa butters. I don't know. But I would say you got to try whatever's out there.
Okay.
I would say, though, if are you talking about stretch marks and stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay. I think that has to do with the person's specific, skin makeup. And I think it really varies wide. Like there's a huge variation in that. But they fade.
Okay.
I think like if I remember correctly, I think I had them, but I don't anymore. So
there isn't an end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, either there's an end or you just change your expectation of what things are supposed to look like.
What was the day I was born like? Did you know you were going into labor? Was there any question, or did you have any false labors before that?
I had no idea. In fact, I was put on a high risk pregnancy with you towards the end. So my blood pressure ended up going up, and there's something called preeclampsia where, people can get very swollen and people worry about their blood pressure and, long-term effects of those physical side effects of pregnancy sometimes. And I was starting to develop some of those. So I had to go into the hospital, and they would hook you up and they would monitor basically, your heart rate. They would monitor me. They just made sure everything was okay to make sure that you were not in distress ever. And so I was going through that process. So I became good friends with the nurses at the hospital, going back and forth and whatnot. And you were born about 5 weeks early.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going up there to the hospital, and they hook up these belts, and they hook up kind of an ultrasound, and they do a stress test on you. They stress test the mother, and they stress test the baby. And so I remember they would look at it and be like, "Oh, you're having contractions." There's something called Braxton Hicks contractions, and they're contractions, but they're not the contractions that lead to labor. And I was like, "Really?" Like, I don't even feel anything. I thought, this is going to be easy. I've got this down. Like, I thought, this is like, I don't understand what all the, noise is about. This is going to be simple. I just thought, I can't even feel it. How do I even know if I'm going to know if I'm in labor? But it is obvious. And so the night before you were born, I was having a hard time sleeping and really experiencing a lot of pain and whatnot and contractions. And I think I may have even been at the hospital that day. Mm-hmm. So I slept on the couch, couldn't fall asleep and whatnot. In the morning, your dad's like, what's going on? Like, why didn't you tell me you're not feeling good and whatnot? And I'm like, I don't know. And so your nanny came over. I called my mom, and she came over, and she's like, I think you need to go to the hospital. And she's like, I think you're going to have a baby. And yes, that's exactly what happened.
How many hours were you in labor for, do you think?
Well, I was at the hospital for maybe 4 or 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, something like that. Not too long, but I don't know exactly when it started. I know I was very uncomfortable during the night. Mm-hmm. So, but again, like I think you were pretty easy. Like there was nothing, it wasn't a long labor.
So there wasn't like screaming at dad in the labor room that he's never going to touch you again or anything like that you see in the movies.
Oh no, I had an epidural. Yeah, no. Yeah. There's no reason for that. That's what we call modern medicine, sweetheart.
Okay. So, but even with the epidural, like you felt it, right? Like,
Well, no, not after the epidural.
Really?
So once you have an epidural, they can control how much medicine they give you, but it's pretty much, you don't really feel anything.
cool.
You can feel as little or as much as you want.
I choose little.
Yes, me too.
Okay, so Dad
I
tells
can
me
tell you that with your brothers, though, they were almost born in the car. And so I do know exactly what it's like actually to go all the way through. And yeah, I do. The other way is far more pleasant.
Okay, so Dad tells me that when I was born, I came out blue. Were you aware of any of this? Because it sounds like he was super freaked out at first to know that everything was okay. Because I was 5 weeks early. I didn't come out the right color. And he was like going through a little bit of a panic for a bit. Were you going through that same emotional journey? Or were you like, I've just given birth, don't talk to me?
Neither one. I wasn't panicked. So you were born. And, so you were born and they kind of put you on my stomach and then they had another team that was there and they took you right away probably to the NICU. I'm not sure exactly where they took you, but your dad went with you. So he was with you through that process. And I was still in the labor and delivery room, but I really didn't know what was happening. They don't. Medical professionals are very conscientious of the effect that their reaction is going to have on their patients, right? And so they did not act panicked. They did not act like anything was wrong, but I'm sure in their minds they knew that when a baby is that blue color, that means they're not oxygenated, right? And so I'm sure that they were worried. But that did not come across to me. I did not know. And so that was all kind of an after story.
Gotcha.
And I mean, they didn't hide anything from me, but it was very quick. They took you in very quickly, monitored your oxygen level and you were fine. But I'm sure that they knew that they were in a critical time frame.
How long were you in the hospital for after giving birth to me?
Not long, a couple days, 3 days, maybe.
How long? Why do they do that with women? Is it just to make sure that like the blood loss is okay, or like, yeah? I guess what's the logic with keeping women after they've given birth?
Do you mean? Does that sound like a long period of time to you?
I don't know what the period of time should be. I don't know the story.
Okay, I think that. I mean, you'd probably want to ask probably an OBGYN, but what I would think, kind of how I look at it is that I think insurance probably determines largely how long you stay in the hospital because it's expensive. Mm-hmm. And I would think that if your insurance would cover it, it probably is good to stay. It's probably good to stay a week or whatever it takes, whatever the time frame is, because you're healing, you've got a new baby. And they help you with a lot of things in the hospital. They show you how to feed the baby and how to take care of it. And, there's nurses there so you can sleep. And there's a lot going on. So if you can stay, it's good. They can watch you, make sure everything's okay, make sure the baby's okay. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times when the time frame is very, very short, that probably has more to do with insurance and economics.
Okay.
Than a healthcare decision. But again, I don't know. Some people maybe don't want to stay that long either. Maybe it's a personal choice. They should have spobbers. That would be awesome.
Give yourself a nice little cucumber mask and some Enya playing afterwards.
That's right.
Okay, so then you take me home and you're a loving mom at this point. And I don't know, if the one story I remember of me as a baby that you told me is that you would just even after I was asleep, you would just sit there and watch me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So bringing you home was amazing. So at first, when I first brought you home, But one of the first things I remember is I was so afraid that like you were so fragile, I wouldn't give you a bath. I'd wait for your dad to get home and he would give you a bath and whatnot. And I was like terrified that, what if I bumped your head or whatever, like, but babies are resilient. That's a good thing. And kind of got used to that. It wasn't very long. And then, I was just enamored with you from day one. And you would take a nap and I would hold you the whole time. I wouldn't put you down. And your nanny, my mom, would come over and look around the apartment. And I mean, she never really said anything, but I'm sure she was kind of thinking like, maybe you should put the baby down and clean the apartment too. Like there's other things that need to happen around here. But I remember her saying like, she can sleep on her own. And I thought, I know, but it was very short-lived, Babies are babies for a very, very small sliver of time.
Did I sleep through the night? Or I guess the other thing that gets sold in media and talking to new parents is how difficult it is to deal with a living being who can't communicate what's wrong with them.
So, yes, that's true. But you were not difficult that way. You were so easy. So you were very, very easy. And you were kind of on schedule, right? So there are kind of guesstimates of like milestones. And for babies, they'll say, babies will start sleeping through the night. And when they say sleep through the night, they're talking like 6 hours. They're not talking like nice 10-hour sleep. They're just talking like more than 3. And so you hit that mark right on target. 5 weeks was, I think, at that time what that like marker was. And basically 5 weeks, that was it. Started sleeping through the night. You're on schedule. Like things were very, very much like clockwork with you.
We're going to jump into my brothers next and their story. But as a precursor to their story, because it does relate, shortly, was I like 1 or was it sooner than that? Your appendix ruptured?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you were about 1. Yeah, and that was like, so it ruptured and there were lots of medical complications. At that time, I was in the hospital for over a month. That was very difficult. Lots of scar tissue and whatnot. And so your brothers, I couldn't get pregnant. But, at the time when that all happened, at that point in time, I was not thinking about having more kids. Mm-hmm. I really thought that I was going to have 1 child and that was it,
Neat.
Yeah. And so it wasn't until you were probably 6 or something, 6, 7, something like that, when we started thinking about having another child.
It must have happened sooner because 6 is when I was 6 when the boys were born.
So maybe 5. Maybe you were 5. Mm-hmm. I thought you were older. I thought you were 7. I think you're 7 years older than that. I'm
6.5.
Okay.
Because of the May-October difference.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe around 5.
So the way it relates is, well, first off, how terrifying must have it been to have like a 1-year-old and be in the hospital for a month?
Okay, so for me, it wasn't terrifying for me. I was so sick that I was essentially unconscious for a month. Mm-hmm. And so I was too ill to really kind of grasp what was happening. But I think for you, I know there was a point that like my family decided not to bring you to the hospital because I think it was upsetting. Mm-hmm. I think it was probably more upsetting to everybody else. I was too sick to know.
At what point did you find out that this event had essentially made you infertile? When
we started to try and have another child, it became obvious like we weren't getting pregnant, and it was kind of like, what's happening? Went in for testing and lots of scar tissue from when I was in the hospital. And the doctor said that there was just no way to get pregnant, that there was too much scar tissue. We tried a lot of different things. We went through, different fertility drugs and whatnot. And so your brothers, we had them in vitro.
Mm-hmm. So how does in vitro work?
So in vitro works, it's different for different people, but the way it worked for us, and I mean, probably generally this is how it works, but depending on, the parents and who's having a child, there's going to be some variation in this. But for us, basically what they do is they give you fertility drugs that make you ovulate several times in a cycle, right? So you have, when you ovulate, you have like a cyst, and that cyst contains an egg, right? And so they give you drugs, and they can look with an ultrasound and see how many cysts you have developed. And when they look at that and they think, okay, there's several eggs there, we're going to harvest the eggs, they go in and they take them out. And so they give you drugs, and that's pretty hard on your body too, right? Because your hormones really go all over the place. And then they go in, they harvest the eggs, they take them out, and then they do, I'm not sure what their tests are for viability, but they look at, I imagine different things, kind of say, okay, we've been able to take out, 12 eggs. We think that 5, 6 of them look like they're probably viable. They fertilize those, and then they see how many we'll take. This all happens in a petri dish. And then when the eggs get fertilized, they go through like a cell division. And during that stage, they can kind of say like, okay, these look like they're going to be viable embryos, and they basically reinsert them into the womb.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah. And then they do a pregnancy test at a later time. I think it's about 5 or 6 weeks in, and check. And they'll say like, we did that. They put 3 eggs in, 2 took. It was stressful though, because by the time you go through in vitro, or for me, by the time I went through in vitro, that by that point we had been trying for a while, and there's a lot of disappointment in that. There's a lot of like sadness when you find out you're not pregnant, when that's what you really want. You're really aiming for that. There's not a whole lot of control you have over that result. And for us, that was kind of going to be it. Like, we were going to try in vitro, and then if that did not work, then I was prepared to do something else, not try to have more children or anything, but I wanted more children. So it was a very difficult time frame. And I went to a painting convention after they inserted the eggs and stuff. And it was either right before I left or right when I got to Vegas. They had taken the pregnancy test and had called me. And I was there, and they said, yes, it was positive, and it meant that the embryos had taken, and I didn't know how many, I just knew that I was pregnant. I was so happy, Yeah, but it was very different, with you. It was so, I don't know, nature took over, everything, everything was just kind of wild and topsy-turvy. And then with the boys, it was like, I felt like I just had to be so careful with everything,
So I remember the phone call when you told me that you were pregnant. And I mean, in my defense, I was like 6 I just turned 6. And up until that moment, for like the previous 2 years or so, I was like demanding of you and Dad that I wanted a younger sister, because I think kids think that they get to ask that of their parents. Like when you're like 4 to a certain age, you're like, I get to be able to ask for siblings. And it's something that is like an appropriate request of my parents, which no, like your parents get to decide that. And I was like really set on the idea of having a baby sister. And when you called me and said that you were pregnant, I was like, huzzah. And you're like, it's going to be twins, which I'm like, that's an interesting plot twist, but I can work with that. And you're like, and it's going to be 2 boys. And I'm like, no, that's not what the agreement was.
Yeah. And this happened in stages, right? I think you were very happy when I got pregnant. I think you were happy about that. I think, yeah, you're a little surprised about twins, but I don't know if you really knew what twins, like, I don't know that you thought a whole lot about, like, this is going to really impact my life.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a little curiosity, but I know you definitely wanted a sister. And yeah, when we found out we were having 2 boys, you're kind of like, I'm out.
Yeah. You had one assignment and you did not provide the results that were requested.
We went off course again.
But then I went through another phase. I remember before they were born and before I had fully understood the impact of life, we had their cribs. And I figured out that I could sleep underneath them. And my plan was I was going to sleep underneath my baby brothers and protect them. And we were all going to share a room and it was going to be great. That narrative changed, but that was the idea at the time.
Yeah, you were a great big sister. Yeah.
I don't know about that. I think I had the best intentions.
No, you were great.
How were my brother's pregnancy? How did that go?
So that was kind of the flip side of you, right? So again, yours was unexpected, out of the blue, topsy-turvy as far as those first couple months is just being sick and, my world changing and whatnot. But really, other than that, then it, smooth sailing. For them, it was very hard to get pregnant. There's a lot more emotion involved just because of that, the disappointment of not being able to get pregnant for so long. And then once I became pregnant, just this feeling of feeling so cautious about everything, so worried that just to make sure everything was okay, that nothing would go wrong. Then when I had that, I also was on high risk pregnancy for them. I did go into kind of a pre-labor with them and they were able to stop it at the hospital. They gave, I think it's Pertussin they give, stops the contractions. They give you steroids to have the lungs, try and get the lungs to develop more. But they ended up stopping the pregnancy. Stopping the going into labor, stopping the labor. And I ended up going home and they put me on bed rest and they were, I carried them almost to term. They were also probably about 3 or 4 weeks early. Mm-hmm. But, by the time I had them, I was so ready. I mean, being pregnant with twins is not comfortable. And it was hard. And then for them, also that night, I went into labor and I thought, well, I'm going to take a shower. Sometimes they tell you, if it's Braxton Hicks or whatever, take a shower, you'll relax. So I went to go take a shower and everything. By the time I was done, I thought, holy cow, I'm going to have these babies. And so your grandparents came over to watch you. Your dad took me to the hospital. He was driving, I was in the back of, we had an SUV. I was in the back of that laying on the seat. And I'm like, we've got to drive faster. And he's like, we're going 100 miles per hour, on the side street. By the time we got to the hospital, luckily I had the same doctor for a long time and he knew me very well and kind of knew how I was. So when the hospital called him, when I called the hospital and said I was on my way, he was already on alert. So he was already at the hospital because he thought, I know how she is. This is not she's not going to get here and it's not going to be just calm and whatever. She's probably going to wait too long. I think he kind of knew. So I got there, I got to the hospital and the labor and delivery unit was on, maybe the 3rd or 4th floor or something like that. I can't remember, several floors up. And I was so uncomfortable. And when you go into labor, sometimes you'll see in movies and you'll see women kind of walking around, when they're going through contractions, that movement helps with the pain. Mm-hmm. And so it was easier for me to walk and to move than to try and sit in the wheelchair or to stand or whatever, to be taken to the labor and delivery. So I walked up all these flights of stairs, get up there. And so when I walked into the labor and delivery suite, they were like, yeah, sit down. They were going to check you, we'll check to see if you're dilated, all that kind of stuff. They had no idea. So when they did that, luckily my doctor was somebody I knew for a long time. he knew. He knew what to expect. And he was all scrubbed in, you know, he was all suited up and ready to go. And like, and they checked me and the nurse was in there and her face, I'll never forget this. Her face just went white. And she's like, I'll be right back. And she went, they had to get an anesthesiologist immediately because the boys had crowned, like your brothers were crowning. And so that means like you're going to give birth like then. Like there's no reason even to have an epidural at that point. The pain is done. Like you're through the hard thing, right? But with twins, they give you an epidural because in case the second baby is in distress, you need to be prepped for emergency C-section, right? So they don't, like with you I gave birth to in kind of a birthing room. It was not set up for necessarily like surgery, right? I gave birth to them in more of, it's still in labor and delivery, but it's more of like a surgical area, you know, like it's set up that it's set up for in case they have to do a C-section. So the anesthesiologist came in and just like, that was like the fastest, you know, they got the epidural in really quick. And I remember him just kind of laughing. He's like, this isn't going to do much good. You're like, you already went through the hard stuff. He's like, but we have to do it, you know, in case we need it. And they didn't, but the boys were born. I think I was in the hospital maybe half an hour by the time they were born. And they were born like 5 minutes apart. All right. And they kept telling me, don't push. Whatever you do, don't push. You just got to relax. Don't push. Because they were trying to get me prepared in case I needed a C-section, which I did. They both of them were vaginal births. So, but yeah, that was crazy. Yeah. So like, that was like a made for TV, like birth. Like I was lucky they were not born in the car.
It would have been a hilarious story just showing up with twins in either arm.
Done.
Yeah. Could one of you possibly hand me a wet nap?
Exactly.
So they come home. They're about 3 months old. You have a 6.5-year-old. And all of a sudden, something's happened to you that was supposed to be physically impossible.
Yeah. So when I had the twins, I had consulted with my doctor about, you know, should I tie my tube? Should I, you know, all that stuff about what to do about like contraception and all that kind of stuff moving forward, right? And he's like, well, no, I mean, there's not, the chances are really zero. There was so much scar tissue, you know. I mean, he told me 0 chance, really, of getting pregnant. And I was like, okay. So I didn't think too much about it. Wasn't worried about contraception, you know, nothing. I thought, this is it. It was very difficult, like I was saying, you know, to get pregnant. It was a lot. That was a pretty intense journey and whatnot. And then, a few months later, you know, we were like, your dad traveled and it was basically you and me and the boys. And then we had a nanny who helped us. And then my sister came and visited for a while, you know, stuff like that. But like we were kind of getting into our groove, but life really changed, right? Like, I mean, it's very easy to have one child versus like 3. And then, a few months later, your dad was like, doing business in Asia or something like that. And again, I just had that feeling. I was like, I am pregnant. I wasn't as sick. I didn't have like the nausea, you know, it wasn't stuff like that. But I remember I just knew. And I didn't say anything to anyone. I just went and got the test myself. I don't even think I told your dad right away. I mean, I told him as soon as I found out, but I don't, like, he wasn't on like the mental journey with me of like, holy cow, I know I'm pregnant. I have like 3-month-old twins and I know, you know?
Yeah.
And I went to the store, got a pregnancy test, came home, took it. Sure enough, positive. It's like, okay. That was the most shocking of all the pregnancies, actually. Believe it or not, you know, and I think that in some ways that would probably be surprising to some people because you think maybe you're already in the family mode. You're already kind of like you're setting up life is kind of arranged around kids and all that kind of stuff. I was like, holy cow.
No, that is shocking. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stories out there of people who have just given birth. They're not ready to have another kid. Like,
oh yeah.
Any story.
Yeah. And you hear those like when you're in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can remember. So I was walking you to school and I had the boys. We had one of those twin strollers. I was walking you to school and I was walking home and one of my friends came up and we were chit-chatting and I told her that I was pregnant and I remember she's like, oh my gosh, that's so brave. I'm like, brave? It's not brave. It has nothing to do with bravery. Like, it's like, I did not know like this was going to happen.
Yeah.
But that was, I think, the scarier one for me, just with everything. And again, like you just never know. It's so hard when you ask questions like, what is the typical pregnancy? They were all so different, and so with my youngest, with your little sister, again, not expected, wasn't supposed to happen, happened very easily, and then all of these things. So I remember my OBGYN was, I know he was thinking, okay, Michelle, we are not like doing this like craziness, like what happened with boys, and was thinking that this birth would be very fast, right? That I would go into labor and that I needed to be at the hospital quickly. Like he was very explicit. When you feel anything, you are not supposed to get in a shower and get ready. Like you are supposed to get to the hospital. Like you can shower later, like he was very like, this is the way we're doing. He had very, specific instructions. I'm like, all right, got it. And then with her, she, she was born in December. And I remember thinking, oh, this would be great if she was born over Thanksgiving. We could be like, everybody could be on vacation. Like, the family could be, I thought like, that'd be awesome. Like it'd be great planning. It was about when she was due and everything. Nope, nothing. So with her, here she is. I know that my doctor really thought she would probably just basically fall out. Nope, had to induce her.
She found her place and she was staying there.
Yeah, she was like, I am not entering that world. Like, are you crazy? Like, look at all those kids there. So yeah, that was completely opposite. We had to schedule her. She was past due. They induced her. That's not very comfortable. And then when they induced her, then they nicked something during like when they were suturing me up or something. And I ended up getting an infection and stayed in the hospital for a long time with her. Mm-hmm. So that one was probably a little bit more stressful. So she stayed with me. They let her sleep with me and whatnot. But I had you and your little brothers were home. Like, and I was in the hospital for a long time, sick with her. And yeah. So like, there is just nothing. Like, I don't really think there is a typical pregnancy, or at least none of mine, I would say, were typical. It all worked out.
So I remember, the turnaround between the boys and with my little sister was so short, and I didn't really fully understand how pregnancy worked, that I remember you and Dad talking about the 3 eggs and the one dissolving. And I guess what I did not understand at the time was I always thought that my sister was that 3rd egg and she just decided to have like a 20-month gestation period.
Maybe she did.
Yeah.
Maybe that explains it all.
She's like, those 2 can go out. I'm just going to chill.
Yeah. She's like, I'm okay. I'll wait.
Yeah. I do think there's something super miraculous. I mean, I think that conception is miraculous, and like the more we do this pod, I think that there's something amazing. Like the statistics of existing are impossible to calculate because you have the amount of eggs, the finite amount of eggs within a woman, and then the infinite amount of sperm within a man, and then you have to have sex within the perfect time frame. You can only get pregnant within roughly 5 days of your cycle. And like for all of those things to like add up, and then 70% of pregnancies do not go fully to term. And then all of that numbering combined into having a human life essentially exist out of nothing is remarkable to me. And then you have on top of that my sister, who is conceived in a situation that should have been physically impossible. Like all of that is amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. Nature is amazing, you know? Nature and science and the whole combination of it all. You think about it, you know, it's true. You take two cells and they can't become a person. Like that's incredible, you know, like, and what science can do now and it's incredible. It's amazing.
So those are your 3 pregnancy stories for you to share with strangers on Mother's Day.
Yeah, I imagine you could probably ask anyone. They'd have, you know, lots of variations on those stories. I do remember, you know, one thing that's very interesting is when you have twins, it seems like all of a sudden almost everybody you meet has twins. You know what I mean? Like there's this strange draw, and lots of people will come up to you and be like, "Oh my gosh, I have twins too," or, you know, run into different things. And when I ended up getting pregnant with your sister, I remember talking with a friend of mine who, one of her friends had gone through a similar situation. So went through in vitro, had twins, very, very similar. You know, was told that they wouldn't be able to get pregnant and whatnot, and ended up same type of thing, having twins, except for her, she got pregnant right away too, but with twins on her own the second time. So there's always a crazier story than your own.
I can't imagine 4. It was 3 babies were hard enough. I cannot imagine 4.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quickly a 7-year-old can learn how to like hold a child, change its diaper, and feed a bottle when there's 3 babies in the house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think
you do what you have to do, you know?
Like, I think there's a picture of me holding one of the boys, and like he's basically falling out of my arms. Right?
Oh, I know that picture. I love that picture. You look like you're just so like amazed with him. Who knows? Maybe your little mind was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" I think you really liked it though. I think it was fun for you at first. And then it was kind of like, all right, this is a little bit more work than what I was expecting.
I think it was, I loved the novelty of having siblings. Like this was my evolution. I love the novelty. And then we went on a family vacation to Massachusetts. And after being in the plane for like 6 hours, and then we had to get in the car and drive for like another 3 hours.
We were here. We were in DC on that trip.
Oh, were we?
We flew into DC, and then we went to just south of here, a couple hours, an hour and a half south of here.
And one of my twin brothers, who to this day does not like to travel, had decided at this moment that he was done, and he just starts screaming. And my parents kind of look at each other and they're like, "You know what? He'll go to sleep. It'll be fine." It was an hour of the sustained pitch and intensity of this fit that he decided to pitch right at that moment. And I just remember being like, I remember being an only child.
Mm-hmm. I remember that too.
And then I can't pinpoint the exact moment that it happened, but that then evolved into absolutely loving my siblings and wanting to do anything for them. And I mean, all siblings fight, and we've definitely fought with each other and had some scrapes, but also there's no 3 people in this world that I wouldn't defend in a grueling battle to the death.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, I'll fight them in the grueling battle to the death, but I will defend them too.
I will both fight and defend them.
That's right.
I just want to also wish the main topic of this Mother's Day podcast was to talk about pregnancy, but I also want to acknowledge that you don't have to bring a living being into this world to be a mom. Like,
No.
Absolutely not. Like, I know several people who are lovely humans who are adopted, and they absolutely love their parents, and they credit the people who adopted them as the people who are their parents. And I also, on top of absolutely loving my mom and dad, there are a lot of adults in this world who had a humongous impact on my upbringing.
Oh, yeah. Takes a village.
It does. It's not just the 2 people who conceived. It takes a lot of people to raise a child and to mean a lot to that child. And I want to wish all of the peoples who helped make me the person that I am today a happy Mother's Day.
Oh, that's very sweet.
So, Mommy, thanks for coming on my sex pod.
Yeah, no worries. Sounds a little strange, but that's okay.
So, how much are you going to freak out? This is not me telling you. How much are you going to freak out when I'm like, hey, you're going to be a nanny?
Wait, like, are you telling me that or?
No, I'm saying, I'm asking.
Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know. Because, so I think it's very different, right? So when I gave that news to my parents, it was very different. You're older, your career is well underway, you're established, lots of things are different in your life than in mine. So I think like I would be happy for you. I think that I would look at it as, if that's what you want to do, you're excited. But I think again, it would be this weird internal struggle of thinking, holy cow, grandma. Like that is like, just like, like we all have like this construct of how we see ourselves, and it's often not like in alignment with like reality, like, so I think it would be more along those lines of like, again, like these big milestones that I think when you're there, they're wonderful. But when you're approaching, you just don't know what to expect. It can be a little nerve-wracking. So I think, I don't know. When I think about it, I think like, oh, no. Holy cow. But then I know, like, I think I would be like excited. Like, I really think that's how it would work. Yeah. You can't, like, there's so many things in life you really can't plan for. And I think, like, some of the greatest things in life are like that. Probably most of the things are like that.
Well, I'm really glad that I've not had to have that conversation yet. And I think a huge part of it is you told me, you were very upfront, and you told me about sex, and you made it a very safe space that I could come and talk to you, which I think is really important. And I guess on this Mother's Day, something I want to enforce is you talked to all 4 of your kids about sex, and all 4 of them ended up, I think, better for it. And so thank you, Mama.
Oh, you're welcome, sweetie. I love you, cutie pie.
In the STI episode, we talked about teenagers who may not tell their parents that they need to see a doctor because they're too afraid to admit that they've started having sex, and how that's super dangerous and not okay. And you have situations where I think there's no parent out there who wants to know the details of their kid's sex life, but they do always want to know when they're in danger.
Sure. Yeah. And, sex is a very complicated thing, right? Mm-hmm. So there's lots of emotion involved. There's lots of physiological changes involved. There's lots of things. So I think if you can be a safe space for your children, there's nobody else who's going to love them as much or care for them as much or have their back. So I think it's important to like try and take that judgment piece, set it aside, and encourage your kids to, again, you're right. Like nobody wants like front row seat to that. Right. But like, but you want to be the one that like, if they're struggling or if they've got questions or, anything, that like they know that like there's a safe space for them. I would never want like my own children to feel any different. But yeah, I don't want to know everything.
Anything else you want to say? Any other truths to preach?
Happy Mother's Day to everyone. And I don't know, sweetie, you and your siblings are the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, thank you.
And again, like, I don't know that any of you guys like came about in a way that like I was predicting or could have ever predicted, but I would never, ever change any of it. I imagine like parents everywhere feel very similarly.
Mommy, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I'm Megan.
I'm Michelle.
And thank you for joining us.
You will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person.
An absence of
Oh, yeah, you don't have to be thinking about sex.